Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today's episode is with a good friend of mine. Her name is Alexandria Roemer. She goes by Ali. I was just with her over the weekend in Miami, which was fun. Hadn't seen her in a while, and we met about a year ago at a marketing event. Became really good friends. She's doing really well in the digital marketing space. Has a really great business that's just doing awesome right now. And we bonded really quick about a year ago, just talking about childhood shit and relationships and codependency and just all these things that are so important for so many of us, but we don't talk to enough people about them as we probably should. And for whatever reason, just like it was one of the first conversations we've had, and we've been pretty good friends ever since. And especially during lockdown and stuff earlier this year, we started talking almost daily. So we just built a great friendship, always really good conversation. Today's episode was heavily about childhood trauma and sharing her feelings. We both believe that every child has some level or some type of trauma, and just being able to be aware of that, share it, and how it's affecting you in your adult life, no matter your age, finding solutions to get through these things to help with challenges you're having as an adult. I mean, how we're raised and what we experience as a child is so freaking important. So we dive deep into that, talking about how she's dealt with a lot of her childhood trauma, and I'm really hopeful that it helps you, the listener, with shit you're dealing with, because we're all dealing with shit. And if you're not dealing with shit, you're probably not a listener to the show, because we all deal with shit. So I hope you enjoy. And by the way, as a reminder, definitely make sure to subscribe and rate 5 stars and review on iTunes. Greatly appreciate it. And share with your friends if you enjoy it. So
this is Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams, where differing opinions are not only accepted, they're encouraged.
All right, Ali, we are live. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming on even though you're kind of nervous. So I appreciate that.
Just a little bit.
So it's good to see you. We're recording this on a Monday because you're flexible and change your schedule around to make this happen. So thank you. I'm going to the World Series tomorrow. Unfortunately, the Braves aren't going to be there. But you were flexible enough to make it happen on a Monday. And we were just hanging out in Miami over the weekend. So I really hope you had a good time, and it was good spending a day and a half together.
Yeah. It was great. I mean, I like to think that I'm a lot more flexible in the moment, and that I'm down to, just take things on. And then when it gets closer, I realize I'm like, wow, I just agreed to do a podcast on a Monday after I've been out of town for a couple of days, and I have work coming at me from all directions. So it's kind of been a practice this morning in balancing my time and kind of noticing things that I say yes to in the moment that I don't necessarily always think through of how they're going to unfold when that time comes. So yeah, we're learning and going with it. Just going with the flow today.
Yeah, so we went to, I guess both of our friends now, Shay Rowbottom, who was on a previous podcast episode of mine, which is how you heard about her. We went to her birthday/Halloween party. Everybody wore their masks. No, I'm just kidding. Not their Halloween
We just
masks.
showed up as normal. Yeah. We all have masks on, right?
Yeah, actually, I didn't even think about the connection there. I was actually making a joke about COVID masks, but then it was a Halloween party, so it's, by definition, some people did wear masks. But I was telling a couple people, I'm like, I'm going to a party in Miami, and they're like, oh, wow, party in Miami. They're thinking it's going to be like a rager. I'm like, well, it's not exactly the type of party that you probably have in mind. What was your experience like and your takeaway from Shay's party?
Well, first of all, let's just talk about how cool like the power of podcasting is in the first place. That, Shay is somebody that prior to hearing her episode on your show, I had no idea who she was. And listening to the episode that you had with her, which is amazing. So highly recommend anybody listening to this. If you haven't listened to the episode with Shay yet, go do that. Listening to that, I felt like I kind of almost like she was like a kindred spirit, and then went and listened to her podcast. And then this just kind of unfolded to where Jeremy invited me to go to her birthday. So I mean, I just think that's pretty cool. Like that's literally the result of your podcast is how all of that happened, how last weekend unfolded. So, I think that's pretty rad. But, yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any expectations necessarily going into it. Like for me, I guess on a surface level, thinking of like a party in Miami, it would be like a little bit more, of like a rager, I guess you could say. But kind of given the fact that I've been listening to Shay a little bit and know a little bit about her, that wasn't really kind of the way that I would have anticipated a party of hers being. Yeah, I mean, you get a bunch of people who are all in the path of, spiritual enlightenment and personal growth and stuff like that. You put them all together and it's not necessarily going to be ragey. It's just going to be a lot of love and a lot of, just acceptance of people that you meet. And I think that that's really refreshing, and so different than, going to a party in LA where it's like, everyone's kind of got an agenda and is a little bit more standoffish and doesn't necessarily introduce themselves to you right away. And if they do, then it's kind of like, who do you know? Or like, there's just kind of an air of reservation from my experience, like versus a party compared to a party in LA versus like something like with Shay's group of friends. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I mean, ultimately it's a better experience to, meet people that genuinely are just kind and warm and welcoming. And it can almost be off-putting because I think that as, people that we go to a lot of different social events, it's kind of different. And it can almost seem inauthentic, which is ironic.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been to a party with as many spiritual healers as Shay's party.
Right? Everyone's talking about like doing ayahuasca and all their experiences and telling you like their life story like 2 minutes into meeting them. You're like, whoa.
Yeah, that one lady we talked to right when we got there, I can't even remember her name, but she was sharing like a crazy story how she had some terminal disease, right? And then she got into this
lupus
plant medicine. Yeah.
Yeah, she cured her lupus through iboga, which is just incredible.
I didn't even hear about that before until she talked about it. That was some like deeper, more than ayahuasca type shit I wasn't even aware of.
Yeah. They're like, oh, ayahuasca. Have you ever done iboga? I'm like, well, let's pump the brakes. For me, ayahuasca seems like the extreme one. So yes, definitely haven't done iboga yet.
For those that don't know, and this is how she explained it to me because I'm obviously not an expert. Ayahuasca is like a 6-hour trip. A journey is maybe a better way to describe it, but a 6-hour journey. And it's called iboga. Is that how it's pronounced?
Yeah.
That's 36 hours, she said. So a day and a half trip. It's actually not even, it's illegal in the U.S., so she does these retreats outside of the United States. I could see why, and I'm a big guy for all drug legalization, but I could see why something that puts people, knocks them down for 36 hours could be, for people that aren't big fans of drugs. They're like, we should probably make that illegal. That doesn't sound very safe.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it definitely is about the environment for that one.
Yeah, so I have to start with ayahuasca for the 6 hours before I go into a 36-hour trip. She was saying she was like an eagle, like flying. I was like, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
So I made a comment about, I was like, I've never been to a place where everybody's so loving and friendly. You noticed that as well, right? Like everybody's just so friendly and huggy, and like why do you feel that's not as common as it should be? People aren't that friendly.
Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Does it come across as like off-putting to you when people are that, warm and welcoming?
Yeah, and I'll paint another picture just for the listeners. Like we go into this, we're one of the only two, actually we're probably about a third of the people didn't dress up. It was a Halloween party, and you were kind of on the fence about dressing up, and my costume got delayed in the mail, so I ended up just not dressing up. So we walk into this big house in Miami, and you don't know what to expect. We're one of the only two not wearing a Halloween costume, and just everybody is unbelievably friendly, and just it's like eye contact when you talk to them, just like happy to see you and meet you and connect with you. I connected with a couple people there that have like followed up with me. Like they're just like really great
Yeah,
to
same.
meet you. Like just like the
Hmm.
friendliest people. And I think a lot of it's not something you see at like random parties or just random events in general. And that's I think a lot of that has to do with Shay, but and I know a lot of this, what we're going to be talking about, because I have some good stuff to talk to you about, is a lot about like mental health and healthy relationships and love and stuff like that. But to answer your questions about off putting, yeah, just because we're not used to it. Not that I don't deep down like it, not that it wasn't kind of cool, but it was so out of the norm that it was a little, I was kind of guarded. I'm like, what are these people doing? It's just sad that
Yeah,
I would be guarded for people that are trying to be loving and affectionate and nice to me. But yeah, it was kind of off putting just
right.
based on because I don't see it a lot.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's not necessarily the norm. I think a lot of the times we kind of live in this hyper vigilant state, and we have to kind of first assess like if people are, going to be dangerous. So we kind of feel like we have to be a little bit more reserved when we first meet people. Um, but yeah, from my experience in being around people that are more in the spiritual, world of self-discovery, there isn't any of that reservation. It's a lot more love, and they lead with that, and it shows in initial interactions with them, because I have a group of friends here in Encinitas that you go up to them and they're like, just so great to meet you, to see you. I'm so glad you're here. And you really feel it. Like it really feels like they really mean that they're really glad to see you. And it's almost like I feel kind of guilty almost in a sense when I'm just like, what? Like, what do you mean? It's like, it's so great to see, like, you don't even really know me, but it's like, it's just a better way to start off an interaction with somebody. And I think that, it definitely made me feel more vulnerable in the beginning, being in that kind of a situation, because I feel like these people truly see me and not like a mask that I'm trying to present. Because I think that the way that I see it, at our core, humans are, loving, and we're meant to interact, and we're meant to socialize and connect on deep levels. So when people come up to me and they're like, it's so great to see you, I feel like they're actually seeing me for who I am. And I think that part is what makes it a little bit off-putting, because as much as we walk around wanting to be seen and understood, when it actually happens, I think it's a little bit terrifying. Because then people can actually, they see you. Oh my God, they see me. They know who I am. Like there's nowhere to hide, really. So yeah, that's my experience with that. But I mean, it's a practice, and I'm working on being more open and less guarded, because it leads to better connections ultimately, in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, just to kind of paint another picture of the environment we're in, if you can just imagine it probably is more than half. It's probably three-fourths of people that are in the healing space on some level. Either it's like herbal medicine, just and they're just you walk into a room filled with that, and it's a really different type of energy than just walking into a typical house party or a club, especially where it's like giant ego. You just feel the ego energy in like a club, right? So yeah, it was very unique. It's probably one of the only times my whole life I've felt like that. So yeah, and it is unfortunate that it's unique to feel love and the way that we did, and to us that's weird. And I bet like it's uncomfortable for us, and I feel like we've been really working hard on growing ourselves. So imagine like the typical person. I mean, it would be probably really scary and really off-putting. Like I've
Yeah,
spent years trying to like
absolutely.
be better at receiving and giving love and sharing my feelings, and it was still tough for me after all this work and coaching and books. And so I can imagine like somebody not doing that, it could be really, really tough. And I guess that's why.
Yeah.
And I actually talked about this on my podcast with Shay, and I may have mentioned this with you. Do you know why we, like humans, typically call people nerds and just put labels like nerds and like what's like the term people give for the spiritual healers? They just call them like some insulting name, like woo woo type stuff, or
Like hippie, I don't
yeah,
know,
hippie.
hippie or woo-woo or
I I heard it could have been Brene Brown, but it was definitely some psychotherapist or something talking about the reason we label these types of people, or like people that go to like Comic-Con in San Diego and are just like full on costume, where it's just like, whoa, like we call them names because we can't even fathom how they have that much confidence to just be themselves and just put themselves out there, because we don't have the confidence to do that. So it's easier for us to just shit on them and call them names, nerds,
right, yeah.
hippies,
I mean,
whatever.
people are mirrors. So like what you see in other people, like it is in you somewhere too. So like if you're calling somebody out for being so self-expressed, like that's something to look at in yourself. It's like, well, maybe I'm not self-expressed in some area of my life and I would like to be more. And this person is, and it's almost like a form of envy, and we disguise it as like putting them down or something like that, to strengthen our own ego, of course, because it's easier to do that and makes us feel, I think, more powerful than to acknowledge the real underlying truth that we might not even actually be conscious of, which would be like, I want to be more self-expressed in my life,
Yeah.
So, and it's the same thing like when you go somewhere and you're around more spiritual people and you're so loving and you're like, these people are like, they're way too much. They're so woo-woo. They're like just like hugging me automatically. It's like, maybe deep down, there's like a part of you that actually wishes you could be more like that. And so it's easier just to, throw shade at it.
Yeah, it's probably a majority of the case they wish they could be like that, or just have have that level of comfort in themselves to just go up to somebody and hug them and like I mean, yeah, like even for me, like I still see that. That's tough for me. All this work because of patterns, it's still really tough for me to be affectionate sometimes. So when when I'm around that, yeah. But that I'll say, just like one final thing on Shay's party, like I think you're the average of the 5 people. That's probably one area I have to be around a little bit more after just being around that. Is I've been surrounding myself with wealthy people and people I work with. Some like spiritual healer type of energy I probably could use some more of in my life, I've realized. I think that was refreshing and healthy for me. So I don't know about for you.
You know what the hardest part about being around the spiritual community is for me, I think, from what I've learned, is that there's so I work. My friend and I, we're business partners. We do digital marketing. It's very, very fast paced. It's very much like, we work hard. It's quick. We're always doing something. And I think there's a little bit of like, a little bit of worth attached to that. And like, I kind of wear, as much as I don't really like to admit it, I wear the I'm busy as kind of like a badge of honor. Like it makes me kind of like significant in a way. And there's none of that in the spiritual world. And it's like, they believe that they know that they're taken care of and like things will come to them and they can manifest things and there's no need to push so hard in life. Which is so opposite, and something that I'm working on being better about is just like taking things slower and like just approaching things with the knowingness that things are going to get done, even if I'm not like throttling through my day with like a full calendar, and if I didn't get everything done, then like that means that I'm like bad or whatever that I make it mean about me, lazy or any of those things. Like sometimes you just need to take things as they come and not be so pushy. So yeah, it's a big difference for sure, because then I've like noticed myself judging these people as I'm like, well, maybe they don't work hard enough or whatever, but I'm like, they're happy. Like, what can I learn from them to be less stressed in my life and still get things done, but find happiness and equilibrium and not be so stressed all the time. So
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been judgmental as fuck about people like that in the past. I mean, I'll be like, I'll say stuff to myself or to other people. Like, that's why they don't earn any money, because they like that. That's because they're like that. And deep down, they're
Right,
deep down,
right.
they're way happier than me, and maybe they just don't value money as much as me. But to make me feel
And a
better,
lot of them do earn a lot of money.
or they
A
earn
lot of
enough
them
to
do.
where that makes sense for them. Like maybe 100 grand a year based on their lifestyle is more than they could have like ever imagined they would need, and they live a super like simple lifestyle and they love it, right? Like
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it comes down to like what the values are. And for some people it's money, and for some people it's freedom, and for a lot of people those things are interconnected, but for a lot of people they're not. So,
speaking of values, though, I just when I was writing down my core values, I think it was maybe Thursday. I was writing them down sometime last week, and I just felt right for me to make freedom number two and love and authentic connection number one. So I made that above freedom for the first time ever, which
wow.
is
I know that that's been kind of it's been moving around on your list. I know for a while.
it's been like going up. The like love one's been going up. Freedom has like almost always been my number one. The reason I think it went to number two is because now that I have a level of freedom, I've realized it's extremely important to have good relationships and authentic connections to spend all that free time with. So it's
I mean, yeah, that's good. That's great. Because I mean, it's like, yeah, you can be as free as you want, but like if you don't have love and connected relationships, like how free are you really?
I
I
agree
think there's going to be a limited sense in your life in some capacity. If you don't have that, there's not going to be that full feeling of freedom.
for sure. I
Maybe
wanted,
freedom, but a lot of loneliness. And then is that free?
which is yeah, which is what I've dealt with. Which by the way, like, and I talked a little bit about my buddy Mike on the last podcast with this. When you're building, you know, I'm sure with G, your business partner, I'm sure it's similar. It's probably similar for all of us. It's similar for a lot of entrepreneurs. Like we're working hard to build, 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 build. We never really think about, okay, once we get to this goal, what are then we going to do with that time? And I think a lot of people continue to just work as an addiction. That's one route. There's
Yes.
there's the super lonely, depressed, I'm super successful, now I'm really unhappy with my life route. And then it's just like what am I going to do when I reach this goal? And that, I just started thinking about that. Like what am I going to do with this free time? Cuz I I don't think most of us do think about that while we're building, because the main goal is to just build and uh, achieve what we want, right? But
Right, right. And I think that, I mean, I think that's key. And I think that honestly stems down to the self-worth thing also, because it's like, if we're like with G and I, like if we're working towards a goal and, we don't celebrate and it's just on to the next goal, then it's like, do we not feel like we're worthy of the celebration? Like, when is it ever going to be enough? You know?
yeah,
So I try and really we've worked on this, and I try and slow us down. And like when something like kind of monumental or big happens, I'm like, hey, like let's just pause for a second and look at this. Like this is something that we dreamed of, like a year, however long ago it was. And it's here. Like, let's just soak that in for a second. That feels good. There's a big difference between that and getting complacent, I think. But I mean, stopping to pause for a second is so key, because it's like there's no finish line to any of this, right? Like the finish line in life is death. So like what? Like you have to stop along the way. Otherwise, like as cliche as it is kind of about the journey and like learning to find the appreciation along the way, because what else do you have?
I agree completely, and that's what I've written down in my journal. It's like finding the balance of I am grateful for where I am today. I love who I am today. I'm perfect who I am today. However, I know there's still all these areas of my lives where I can continue, or areas of my life I can continue to grow. So like being grateful for where you are, but
Yeah.
also knowing that like I have so much more potential.
Yeah, I mean that's a sticky one, because people are like, well, if we become accepting of where I'm at, then that means that like I can't also want to be better. And I don't believe in that. I think I used to a lot more. But yeah, like, I mean, we can relate this to fitness. Like, as you know, like that's been a big part of my life. Like I used to compete, I used to do all of that. And it's like I can look at myself and know that there's areas that I want to improve on. And also not hate myself in the process. Like I've gone that route too. I've looked at myself and be like, well, when I look like this, then like I'll have more self-love and I'll feel better. And it's never like that. I mean, like especially with fitness stuff, like I have to be grateful for all of the things that my body does for me on a daily basis. Like it keeps me alive, it keeps me safe, keeps me healthy. You know, like I haven't been sick in so long. So like if I have a couple of extra pounds that I want to lose or I want more muscle, like that's great. But like acknowledging first that I have a body that even allows me to move in the first place is ultimately going to make me so much happier on my way to getting to losing those 5 pounds or whatever like vanity type thing it is. Like as long as I have my health and I can be grateful for that, then I can like begin to work towards other things. Like because if I'm just spending so much time being like hating myself, like it doesn't become an enjoyable process. And it's way less likely that I'm going to be successful in getting there. And then when I do get there, it's still not going to be enough.
Yeah.
Because there's no appreciation. So
as you're sharing that, I'm thinking about as you're sharing like the stereotypical anorexic that's just like it's never skinny enough, or like the bodybuilding man addict that's just like never muscular enough.
Yeah. I mean, I went through that. Like I competed, I did 5 bikini competitions, and I remember like, I mean, I don't even have to remember. I don't have a lot of pictures when I was in like peak shape, because I remember I would look at pictures of me and just pick them apart. And like I look back on some of those pictures now and can remember taking them and like being like, oh, like this isn't good enough, like my abs don't look good enough. And like me looking at those pictures now, like I'm like, shit, I had a 6-pack. Like what was I picking apart? I looked great, but I didn't feel great. It didn't feel enough. So I mean, that goes for anything. Like it's not just fitness, it's business too. Like we can hit all the goals and we can, you know, crush revenue and do all of the things that we say, but like it has to feel good. Yeah. And I think that the feeling good part is like something that we've been working on more so in our business. Is like the feeling part comes, I think, from having a good team, and that a team that's in alignment that you enjoy working with. Because when I don't have people that I enjoy working with, then makes hitting goals a lot less enjoyable and a lot less possible, honestly. So it's the same thing. You can apply it to any area of life, really.
I agree completely. I agree. What I know one last thing on Shay, because I think the only thing the only reason I'm bringing up Shay is because that's why we were just together in Miami, and I know you said that you liked her because you felt like there were a lot of similarities with, like, she's ahead of you a couple years and a lot of similarities in your relationships. Yeah. Where do you feel that Shay was similar? Because I'd like to, talk about healthy relationships with you, because I know that's something common we talk about.
Yeah, for sure. So hearing Shay's story, I think, I mean, she has a history of trauma that is different. I think that all humans have some type of childhood trauma to work through. For me, I lost my dad at a young age, and I was 14, and that's something that I don't feel like I really ever dealt with. I think that I thought because I had like compartmentalized the loss and continued to live my life, that meant that I was done with it. And the more I've gotten into meditation and therapy and other like modalities of healing, like reading books and learning, things like emotions started to come up that kind of indicated to me that maybe I'm not over this. Maybe I haven't even processed it at all. And what I connected with Shay on is although her story is very different, I heard a lot of that come up in her life too. And these things that we don't deal with and we don't heal from, traumatic events in our life, whether it's like the death or whether it's like, just your parents weren't around as much as you wanted them to be when you were younger. These things impact us subconsciously, and they kind of are like almost like the marionette, and they're like pulling the strings in the way that we live our lives. And until we really like peel back those layers and look at what's underneath it and heal from it, I think that it can kind of continue to wreak havoc and prevent us from living a life that we would ultimately want to have. It's just kind of like a hindrance. So with Shay, I see her as somebody who has not only discovered that, but gone through the healing and has come out. Healing is never like a finite thing. It's not like she's just like, oh, I'm done and I'm perfect now. She's still on her path, but like I said, she's a couple of steps ahead of where I'm at, because she's really gotten to the root of some of, the ugly things that have happened in her childhood. And she's been able to realize how that's impacted her life. And that's honestly just such a courageous thing. And then to go and create a podcast and share that, like the deepest things that have impacted her life. And I think that that's just insanely admirable. So yeah, that's the connection that I have with Shay. And I just very much so would like to, be around people like that. Like you said, average of 5 people. I'm like, okay, you've healed and you're healing. Like, show me how to do that. Show me how that's got you to the point where you are this like, you've built businesses and you're not limited by that, because you know that you can do it. You've healed your codependency. So you don't need your loser boyfriend to be the person that is going to take you through building a business because maybe you don't feel worthy. Like, you're just going to go do it because you're good enough.
What also I think Shay, at least for me, and her childhood trauma is, and it's never healthy to just compare childhood traumas because in our own lives it's always huge. But I will say,
right,
knowing that she was, and she's very open and public about this now, that's kind of the point of her podcast. She was, legitimately molested as a child, like that. I just kind of look back, I'm like, okay, like I had a pretty good childhood. Like, it's good to just have that perspective. And I don't even know if that was her intention with sharing it. But for me, not that we all have stuff to work through, but I think it does kind of, okay, like that didn't happen to me. So I have a lot to be grateful for. And at least like switching my brain to gratitude rather than just always looking at, areas for improvement. I think just that little thing has been helpful, regardless of all the deep work and everything going on. Just that right there, I was like, okay, it made me more grateful for my childhood, right?
Right. I mean, I think that's awesome, and I feel gratitude too. But it is really dangerous to compare childhood traumas to other people, because it's like I heard this from I think it was a Brene Brown podcast, and it was like the worst kind of grief is your own grief. So it's like, yeah, maybe you haven't experienced, all of those things, but that doesn't mean that the pain that you may have felt from whatever you experienced in, your own childhood, or what you didn't experience that you craved from your own childhood, it doesn't mean that that's not equally as painful. So all of our own, because we can't know what that would be like for us because we haven't lived that. So I mean, I think everybody's childhood trauma or adult trauma is valid, and it's not a competition of like who's more traumatized. Like, oh well, Shay went through all of this and that's terrible. I must be okay. I must have it pretty good because I didn't experience that. Like, I think that we all have things that hurt and that we need to heal from.
I agree completely. And, I never can go a full podcast in 2020 without bringing up COVID, but that came out.
Oh, Miss Rona. Let's talk about her.
Well, I just feel like this whole, because I feel like I didn't do it that much, but I saw a lot of it. oh, kids will be fine because they're not going to school, they're not going to their prom, or they're just, people are just, were okay just making this judgment and saying, like, this is going to be fine for the kids. Kids that still at their lunchrooms can't even sit next to their friends. They don't sit next to their friends in class. Just all this crazy stuff. And that's definitely having a big negative impact on a young kid that's brain is still developing, that wants connection and love and wants to talk with their friends, because that's all you like, that's what you looked forward to when you're in first grade, is just like seeing your friends and hanging out with your friends. And like we can't just
Or
be
in
like,
high school to go to graduation, or
yeah,
like, yeah.
all that stuff. Like, who are we to say that that's okay? Because a bunch of sick older people for the most part. And again, like, my stance has been like, that's when we started like really communicating more frequently, is because I've been since day one, protect the old people, let everybody else live normal, and if a bunch of younger people get colds, like, they'll fucking get over it. But who are we to say that it's worth traumatizing these kids for giving the average old person an extra few years of life, which is basically what's going on, because the average COVID death is about 80. The average life of the United States is 79. We're protecting already sick and vulnerable and old people from dying, maybe a few years before they should. Which, again, if we can do that without shutting down the whole world, I'm for. Which is why I've been for protecting old people. But I guess, like, I feel the whole, like, and we see this with race and with income. We're just like projecting what we feel is the most trauma and what is okay and what's acceptable and what's not. And I don't know, I'm just kind of ranting now,
Yeah. I mean,
but
that's dangerous, because it's like, it's then you start comparing traumas, and it's like, oh, well, yeah, so what? You didn't get to go to your high school prom because of COVID. Like, at least, like, your grandma didn't die like mine did. And it's just like, how can you even put any of that, like, you can't compare things. Like, for that person, maybe they've been so fortunate to where, like, them not getting to go to their high school prom is the most traumatic thing that they've experienced so far in their life. Maybe, I don't know. Then they're extremely blessed and fortunate.
What I'm thinking of now is a guy like me who, like, never talked to women in high school hardly, like the guys that just, like, generated enough courage to, like, ask the girl he's wanted to go out with for all of high school to the prom. And, like, I'm sure it's a pretty big deal that, like, the prom isn't happening for
Yeah,
that person,
I mean, like,
right?
because then it's like who's to say what's a big deal? Because
Yeah.
it's like, just because it's not a big deal for you doesn't mean it's not a big deal for somebody else. And it's like, I've talked to some people that I very much don't agree with, that they've said that, like, oh, this isn't trauma. Nobody's going to come out of coronavirus with trauma. And it's like, maybe you won't, but I think a lot of people will. And I think that that's a huge misconception about what trauma even is. And people think that trauma is all of these big things, but it's like, trauma can be as something as, slight. That's the thing. Like, it can impact you being so slight that it's where it's like you were forced to be at home and you missed, like, some big life event or something like that. That can still be trauma. Like, that still has impacts that affect people negatively. So yeah, like, I think that we are, as a society, going to have a lot to recover from. Like, this isn't normal, being told to, stay away from people and not to touch anybody and all of these things. Like, yeah, that's definitely trauma inducing. It's not natural.
Yeah, I agree. And society also labels what is okay to be upset about and what's not. Like, there's white privilege, there's all this stuff. It's just like, what about, like, single, like, two parent privilege or non-abusive parent privilege? Like, we could just make a list of 1,000 different privileges, but, like, everybody
Yeah,
have,
I mean, those are definitely privileges.
and we're smart humans. Like, our brains are very complex, and for us to just blanket everything, like, oh, if you're white in the US, you're privileged. It's like, okay, I guess if we just want to paint a broad brush and just make things a very complex issue, very, very simple, then I guess you could say that. But yeah, I think we we tell society what's okay. When I say we, I'm just like using these pronouns, but we we have, and I think that's why we have so much trauma, is because we have our self-talk now. It's like, I shouldn't be upset about this. I shouldn't be upset because I grew up,
Yes.
I wasn't homeless like my one friend, and I should be grateful, and I shouldn't feel. And it's just like, no, we learned this in therapy, right? And in coaching, like, all of our feelings, good or bad, we should address. And it's okay to have bad feelings, but just suppressing them is very, very unhealthy. If the missing the prom is the worst thing that's ever happened to you in your life, you that's okay. And we shouldn't judge people based on that because your grandma died of COVID. Like, they can't be upset about missing their prom. Like, they're both valid feelings if that's what's important to you, and they should be addressed in the healthiest way possible. Like, hey, like, you were this is
Right, right,
your
because it's
yeah.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, this is your high school sweetheart, or this is your you're moving cross country, and it's the last time you're gonna be with your best friend since you were 5, and like all these things that you had planned out. It's just like, that could be very traumatic, right? And like, again, I just we as a society, I just all of us, myself included, have to do a better job at just seeing their side and say, hey, it may not be the same value I have on a prom as they do, or whatever it is. We're just using the prom because I feel that was a huge one coming up in COVID. Haircuts, haircuts was another one.
Right.
But it's just, maybe that's really important to them. Like, who are we to say? Maybe they're not close to their grandma. Like, they don't care about grandmas that much, but the love of their life was going to be at this prom. Like, that's the most important to them. So that's all.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
mean, or
understanding.
yeah, or like maybe, yeah, maybe like, but it's like, what do you win if you are the more traumatized person? Congratulations, you've been through more shit in life. Do you want an award for that? Like, there is no prize for being like, oh yeah, well that sucks, you didn't get to do this because of COVID, but like I didn't get to do this. Like, you're only missing a vacation, I'm missing my wedding. Like, it's like, it's not a competition at all. Like, we all have our own things, and I think that's where, the big word for me this year, and I think a lot of other people, has been empathy. That it's like, I don't have to know what that would be like for you, but like, if I can imagine myself, like, yeah, like I can say, well, whatever, like it's just the prom, but then if like I put myself back into like, my 16-year-old self's shoes, and or even imagine being them and just thinking like, wow, okay, well, this person hasn't had any other significant things been taken away from them in their life. And like, if I hadn't had these other experiences, I would probably feel really similar to that. And that's where people are so afraid to go these days, is to step into somebody else's shoes, because that requires you to feel things that they might be feeling. And I think that a lot of people are selfish with their feelings, and they don't want to think about, what that must feel like.
Yeah, that's well said. What do you think the solution or the solutions are for childhood trauma?
Oof. I mean, I'm in no way like a therapist or anything like that, but I think therapy is something that everybody should pursue, whether you've had childhood trauma, whether you suspect you might have had childhood trauma, whether you're happy in life. I think that therapy is such a great resource, just because it's like you get to talk to somebody who's unbiased, who wants your best interest, and that you don't have to wear the mask that you might wear in your normal life. I think that
Can we agree real quick, sorry to interrupt. Can
yeah,
we agree that I would say every human has had some sort of childhood trauma? I would say it's impossible to not have it.
yes, absolutely. Our
So,
parents do the best that they can, and they inevitably fuck us up in one way or another.
and
But they did
even
do
if
the
it's not
best
our
that they
parents,
might do.
it's a teacher, it's a kid that was being mean at school, it's some big challenge or something that put you down and made you feel a certain way, that if you didn't talk about it or you haven't shared, you've just been suppressing that for 10 years, dozens of years, whatever it is. And so
Yeah, and it lives in the body. Like it will affect you. Like a lot of physical ailments can come from this kind of stuff if it's suppressed for too long.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. And I also agree with you as well. I believe every human should have a therapist or something equivalent to it. Like maybe not a licensed therapist if you know, I don't know what everybody's financial situation's like, but somebody that they can just talk to and share things with at the very least, that's going to give you, that's not going to be judgmental and just going to let you speak some things that, like I've shared thoughts with my therapist that are, like I've never shared with anybody, because we have these thoughts and we just can't go our whole lives being like, oh, I shouldn't have these thoughts, so when they come up I'm just gonna suppress them. Like that's not good. I'm gonna share, be vulnerable and share what's going on in my mind and try to figure out the root of this so I can hopefully find a solution.
Yeah, I mean, because it's kind of like a pressure cooker, you know. You continue like to just turn it up the more and more it like goes on, and then eventually we're gonna self implode if we don't have that outlet. And it's the same with like crying and expressing our emotions too, because otherwise they just live in the body, and that it's the root of a lot of, you know, upset and tension in the world that we live in right now, is like repressed emotions. Because I think that is something that you said earlier, is like that society kind of tells us like what is okay to feel and what's not okay to feel, and the only people that know like what we feel is us. And like we need to be able to be like, this is what I'm feeling, and like maybe it's not rational, or maybe like I don't need to feel this way and I can choose a different feeling and feel better than I do right now. But like to dismiss your feelings based on somebody else being like, well, that feeling isn't a big deal, you shouldn't feel that way. Like that's the most alienating thing in the world for somebody. It's like, for me, I know in my own experience, like if somebody's told me that, like then I feel like I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Like they wouldn't feel like this, so why do I feel like this? Like maybe like I'm not like them. And I think that as humans we forget, but like we're all so connected. We all have, you know, we all have these similar emotions and stories. They might look different, but something that's helped me have more empathy for other people is like, I try and do this when I like go on walks or when I'm at the airport and I'm looking at people. I just kind of look at them and like, you know, we all judge people. Like I'm not going to pretend that I don't. But what's helped me a lot is like I'll look at somebody and instead of like just making a judgment about them, like, you know, based on their appearance or the way that they're like acting, is to look at them and just kind of think about, you know, the two things is like they were a child at one point. So I try and picture people as children, because children are it's a lot harder to judge a child, because they don't know any better. So like this person was a child at one point, and like this person's probably almost guaranteed has experienced some type of loss in their life. And we all know what the feeling of experienced loss is. We know what that feels like to lose something. I think that everybody knows what it feels like to lose something. So that for me is something that can make me feel connected to just about anybody, like any walk of life, is just to look at them as like a kid who's gone through some kid things that might have been hard. And then also to think that they've lost something, and that it's a great way to kind of practice feeling more connected to the world and less alienated, and that we're all so different.
Yeah. Back to the, because and this is my fault, I switched the topics a bit there. Back to the solutions for childhood trauma. And it's okay that you're not a therapist for a couple reasons, I would say, is because one, I don't think therapy is the only solution. So a therapist couldn't be the
right. Yeah, I don't think it's the only solution either.
And not all the therapists don't all the time work on their own shit, so they're very well trained, but they don't work on their own shit. So I feel like you've in particular, that's why I'm asking, have worked a lot on this. So just from your experience, and yeah, like therapy is obviously one of the things that can help, but I don't think, you know, if anyone's listening or they know anybody with childhood trauma and they just know it's an area that could really free them, right? That's the biggest thing about this stuff is freeing yourself. And it's just it feels like a weight off your shoulders, right? When you just get through these things. Like what do you think that the best steps for these people are?
This is tough. Okay, so I want to back up real quick because a lot of people don't realize that they have childhood trauma. But the thing is that what isn't healed is repeated. So for me, it took me a long time to realize that the kinds of relationships I was getting into with, like my ex was very, very narcissistic, had substance abuse issues. My dad also had those things. And so I wouldn't have connected that like my relationships in life were symptoms of childhood trauma. We think that like we have relationship problems. Well, okay, yes, that's true on a surface level, but like why do we have relationship problems? Because oftentimes we're recreating patterns from childhood that are familiar. And we will continue to do so until they're healed. So for me, I learned so I went and got a therapist when I broke up with my ex, and I kind of learned that this is a pattern, and that's kind of what traced it back to realizing that I hadn't dealt with childhood trauma with my dad. So, I mean, I think that most people, like, if you have anything in your life that seems to kind of always happen to you, that might be something to just kind of pay more attention to. And I don't need to give anybody like a cure-all or a modality, because there's so many different ways to heal. But I think that the most important thing to start with is just kind of notice your emotions, notice what triggers you, and then start to see if there's any correlations there. And then you can kind of, gather those things. I'm a big journaler. I like to write my feelings. And I recommend that as well as like a good practice for, kind of just getting in touch. Because I think a lot of the times, I know for me, like I didn't even really know how I was feeling until I started kind of documenting it and connecting the dots. And then once I kind of established patterns, I was able to work through some of those with a therapist. And then I think that it stems down to childhood oftentimes, but we don't realize it on a surface level most of the time, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So I'm just writing down some, like a list, like a childhood trauma cheat sheet here. We'll create a course.
Sounds like a fun list.
Yeah, we'll sell it in $9.97. So I have therapy, journaling, regularly sharing feelings, I feel like, and just sharing these thoughts. Talking to parents, which we're going to talk about in a second, I think is a big one, if you're able. And another one I was realizing as you were talking, and I do this regularly, and a friend of mine corrected me yesterday, and I don't know, corrected, but like suggested that I shouldn't, like I'll have these like thoughts of anxiety or stuff, just because like I've shared with you in the past and people that listen to the show. And if you don't know, like I feel deep down, I crave, like I want to feel special and loved, and we all want that to an extent, right? But I think I, like subconsciously, like really, really want it sometimes. So when I'll have these thoughts about somebody not texting me back or whatever, and my self-talk is I'm being crazy, and I'll start labeling myself as just being crazy, just being a psycho, whatever. I'll like think that in my head. And someone was like, why is that crazy that you feel like that? Like I feel like that sometimes. Like that's kind of normal. Like maybe you're a little bit above average and it's a little more extreme for you, but it's pretty normal too. So I realized, like, just my self-talk with it, I have to be better at, rather than calling myself crazy, saying, hey, this is going on. It's challenging for me. It's stressing me out. It's normal, and I just got to address it. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah,
but
I think it's hard. It's hard for us to validate our own feelings because we don't feel they're not attractive feelings, so we feel like we shouldn't be having them, or like nobody wants to admit that they're insecure when somebody doesn't text them back, so they're like, oh yeah, I just should not feel that way. Like it's okay. Yeah, at the root of that, like you said, is like it's a call for love in some capacity, and I think that in your situation, I think that maybe it would just be to connect it with the childhood thing is just kind of notice like where else has that shown up in your life where you feel like you weren't, like a need wasn't being met like that, like a communication need wasn't being met like that. Because I think that that's kind of maybe why it's more significant for you, is because in your subconscious it reminds you of a time when you were younger and you didn't have a need met, and now it's manifesting in, you know, an unread text message from somebody that you're interested in. That's what I'm talking about, where it's like these same patterns that kind of come up over and over again. And they seem extreme, but really it's because it's one thing happened however long ago, and it just continues to recreate itself in different forms until we realize it's nothing really to be afraid of.
Yeah, and the worst advice I've realized, you know, it took me 30 years to realize this, but the worst advice is, oh, just, you know, fuck them, you're better, you know, you don't need to reply, just don't let it bother you. That's, I feel, the typical human advice in modern times, and that's the worst advice because all I'm doing is just, I'm not addressing the problem, I'm just kind of pushing it to the side, I'm kicking the can down the road. When, like, I think, and it's tough, it's not what people want to do, but telling the person, saying, hey, you know, I'd like to get clear on what our communication is, and these are feelings that are coming up for me, and especially if it's a romantic interest, if it's meant to be, they're going to be okay with you talking about it. If they're just like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
this is way too much, I just can't, obviously you're not a fit, because at least for me, that's just who I am. I overthink things sometimes. I like to communicate, depending on what I'm feeling. Like sometimes I just maybe will be, you know, heavy on the communication side. Like whoever the right person is for me, they're gonna love that about me and understand, right? So just rather than pushing those feelings, like, which is, I feel, what is the common advice, like, screw them, don't let it bother you, play cool. That's horrible advice. It should be, hey, why are you feeling like this? Like, look at it. And if it's something, or it's a person that's really important for you, be like, hey, I wanted to talk to you about something important. These are some thoughts coming up. I know a lot of them probably aren't factual, but this is what's coming up, and I wanted to just talk about it to find a solution. I mean, that's the bravest thing to do, and it's, I feel it's the
Yeah.
right thing to do, and it took me this long to figure that out, and I'm telling you, it makes me feel so much better. I mean, like a giant, like a bunch of bricks off my shoulders. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that that's the general advice from people, is just to be like, oh, well, whatever, like, fuck that girl, then, you know, you can do better, because like, then it's just going to show up again with the next girl. Like, it's like, you got to figure out why you feel that way, in order to be free from it. And it's not, our society loves to avoid things, and like having feelings is seen as a weakness. And I'm really, really hoping that there's going to be more of a shift in that in the future. Like, I think social media has done a number on all of us with the way that we express ourselves, and the way that we have, you know, emotions, and just like the conversations that we have with people. So yeah, I mean, I think that it's crucial to find people where you can have a safe space to express your feelings with, because that's not everywhere. I don't think social media is necessarily a safe place to express feelings, contrary to people's wanting to be heard politically or otherwise right now. I think that it's about finding, you know, just like a close-knit group of people that you can trust to express your with. Because if it does go wrong, if you're expressing your emotions with the wrong group, let's say your entire Facebook feed, and they give you their opinions based on the level of the willingness that they're willing to go within with their own feelings, like, then it's just going to make people more guarded and less willing to share their feelings, because it's like, well, I shared my feelings and this is what happened, so I'm not going to share anymore. It's like, no, you shared your feelings with some assholes who weren't ready to go there, and they're going to be mean and say things like that because they're not willing to look at themselves. But like, if I have people around me that are willing to just hold space for me and listen to what I'm feeling without judgment, every time I do that, it makes it easier for me to say how I'm feeling. So I think that we can add that to the list of, ways to heal from things in life, is having a safe space to do so.
That's a good one.
And knowing what's not a safe space.
Having a safe space / circle to share. I'm just writing that down. Yeah, I just, and the person giving me the advice, or just, it seems to be pretty common advice. Like I'm sure you've heard that too, about the just don't worry about it, fuck that person. We're asking people advice that are just suppressing everything in their own lives. So of course they would tell you that.
It's well intentioned. They want you to feel better, but like they also, it's somebody who's saying that, like, fuck that, whatever, just get over it. It's like, okay, well, like, what would you do in this situation? How would you feel?
Don't let her know that, don't be texting her too much. Don't, all the stupid, like, this is the worst advice.
All the games, and yeah, it's like, you have to wait 3 days after you hang out in order to, like, is that still a thing? I don't know. I don't really, I'm not dating right now, so I don't know what the modality of, what's kosher with texting and communicating is. It's like, just be real. Like, if you like somebody, you connect with them, tell them. Like, I don't know. If that puts somebody off, then they're not the person for you.
A friend of mine in my building, she was talking to this guy, and I'm just being very vague because I'm not trying to use names, because I think, there's a bunch of people in my building that are starting to subscribe to my podcast. So at least I'm getting subscribers, which is good. But this guy she was talking to, he like would text her every morning for a while, and then I think it was 2 days in a row he didn't text her in the morning, and she said, like, I really like when he texts me in the morning, and he hasn't done it lately. And I was like, have you told him that? And she's like, no, I feel like he should just text me in the morning. And I was like, tell him how you feel. Like, just say, hey, I miss texting. And she's like, I've never done that. Like, I feel like he should just know. I'm like, he's not a psychic. Like, tell him. Right. Have you ever told him you appreciate him reaching out in the morning? Like, he could think that he's being annoying, which I feel that way sometimes. Like, I need that validation sometimes if I'm texting somebody every morning and I don't know if they're just like, hey, great, thanks. After a few of those, I could just be annoying the shit out of them, right? So she I was like coaching her to text just to say, hey, I miss you. Like, and it was like that hard. And I'm not like picking on her, because I've had challenges similar to this. But just share your fucking feelings. Just share how you feel. Hey, I miss talking to you. I love when you text me in the morning. It means a lot. It makes me feel special. Like, that's something along the lines of what she ended up texting. And it ended up being fine, because, I think he was appreciative that she told her. But, like, how simple of a solution was that? She was just building up all this anxiety. It probably would have lasted longer if she didn't just share a basic text. Hey, I like talking to you. I love when you text me in the morning. Like, if we just shared our feelings in life, holy shit, we would just get so much further with relationships.
Well, I mean, yeah, like, it's like there's what happens in life, and then there's like the story that we create around it. So it's like, what happens is the guy didn't text her for 2 mornings. In her mind, she's running every possible scenario of like, well, maybe he's not into me anymore. Maybe like it's this, or like whatever it is. And it's just like, we're so afraid to just be like, hey, like, I like hearing from you. I haven't heard from you in the past couple of days, and I miss you. And instead, I think a lot of people, like, we tend to ruin connections that we have with people because we have these, unmet expectations that also aren't communicated with people. So it's like, yeah, it's going to lead to a lot of hurt in our lives if we're upset about things that we think that people know, but they don't, because how would they? We don't go there and tell them.
Yeah, just humans have got to a point, and again, myself included on this, we just assume people know how we think and feel, and everybody is so unique in a lot of ways. They've had, back to the childhood trauma thing, they've had a whole childhood of experiences. I mean, who knows? He could have had a girlfriend last time say, I hate when you text me in the mornings. Like, it wakes me up.
Right.
So
yeah. There's filters on filters on both sides.
He's scared to text in the morning, and who fucking knows, right? But we communicate. back to the childhood
Yeah,
trauma
you don't
thing.
need to play the guessing game if you're just upfront and
Yeah,
honest and authentic. Like, go figure.
I
Go
agree.
figure. That's where personal responsibility comes in though too. It's not it's not his job to text you every day, especially if you've never communicated that you enjoy it or that you don't like it. Like it's your job to kind of like realize like what's happening in your world and like take accountability for it. So it's like, yeah, if you don't like something, speak up about it. If you want something to be a certain way, speak up about it. I mean, I'm not saying like to try, there's a difference. I feel like it borderlines on like controlling the people in your life, which is, can be dangerous as well. But yeah, like just be authentic. As
You
cliche
can
as that is.
you can get what you want out of life just from speaking up. Like, how many people do you know that don't earn the money they want? And it's like, have you asked for a raise? They're like, no, they'll probably just give it to me when I deserve it. And my response to that is always just I look at them
They will never.
in shock. I'm like, that's maybe, but why are you just gonna wait around and rely on them? And just anything, like any type of relationship, we just share how we feel authentically and just keep in the back of our mind that there's another human on this side of the conversation. So many people would be happier, would be in better relationships, better jobs, just from sharing how they feel and not suppressing those thoughts. I we keep getting sidetracked on good conversation, which is good. I wanted the one other point of the childhood trauma checklist, which we're gonna patent after this. So I have 5 things:
Okay.
therapist, journaling, talking to parents, sharing your feelings as regular as possible, and having a safe space and circle. That's what we have so far. Talking to parents thing, I know I've started to do it. I'm going to continue to do it more where I can. I know you've done some of that as well. What's the talking to parents thing been like for you?
Turbulent. It's been turbulent. I think that our parents are our greatest triggers in life, you know? Like they kind of installed our triggers. They know how to pull them. They know where they're at. We know where their triggers are at. Like they're the longest lasting relationship that we have in our life. Like, of course there's going to be some hot spots there if you poke at them. I think the hardest thing with talking to parents is that I think that parents tend to have a vision of us and like, so I moved away when I was 20, moved down to San Diego. And I think that my mom still kind of like in her mind's eyes, she kind of sees me still as like a young girl, kind of like disorganized, maybe a little bit messy, maybe a little bit bratty, maybe a little bit ungrateful, all of those things that like I was as a 20-year-old. And I've worked really hard and I've done a ton of work on myself. And I'm sure I still have bratty tendencies. I'm sure I still have selfish tendencies. I'm sure there's times where I'm not fully grateful for everything that my mom's done. But I have worked so hard and I've made so much progress. I think the last year of my life, I think I've grown so much. So I think that a lot of the issues that come up in my relationship with my mom now is that she's maybe speaking to an older version of me and maybe I'm speaking to an older version of her. And yeah, it can create some conflict because if she'll respond to something that I say, sometimes I do feel like she's responding to me as if I'm like still the bratty teenager or something. And then like that makes me retaliate because it's like, don't you see how hard I've worked on myself, Mom? Like I'm really trying and I'm doing all these things and you just want me to just be this 16-year-old that doesn't clean her room forever. And like, you don't see me. And then what's there? Like the root wound of like not being seen and not being validated. But I mean, the more I do personal development stuff and I'm working on like, yes, of course I want my mom's validation, but knowing that I am whole and complete, regardless of if my mom sees it or not, because I'm not responsible for the lens of her reality. I'm responsible for my own. And I think that as time goes on, we're getting closer and closer to the point of being able to see each other right now in this moment and not bring in the layers of the past that can kind of tarnish a present potential for a good relationship with our parents. But it's challenging. It's a practice for sure, because then like she'll say something and then I'll get reactionary, and then I like realize I am being the bratty 16-year-old, and then I'm like confirming that. And so yeah, it's just a lot of awareness and a lot of compassion. That like, also the other thing is that like our parents, they have their own traumas and stuff too, like when we were growing up, so were they. And that's something that I've really tried to remember when I'm having these conversations with my mom, is that like she didn't have it all figured out. And as kids, we look up to our parents as like they're the authorities in our life. They're supposed to have it all figured out, right? Like we look to them to find everything that we're supposed to know about the world, and they're still figuring it out too. And we don't realize that until we become adults.
When you see kids from high school having kids and you're like, holy shit, they're going to be somebody's parents.
Yeah.
I'm just,
yeah,
wow.
It's wild.
Then I realized, I'm like, parents are, the smarter people are not having kids. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
The smarter, more
smart.
successful, more educated. Yeah, we must be the smartest people because
we're smart.
Yeah.
No. I do want kids, and I do want a family one day. But I mean, I think that I want to be I'm starting to learn, as weird as this is, like I don't like think about like having kids right now, but the stuff that I'm learning through like learning more about childhood trauma and things like that I'm starting to learn more of like what kind of parent that I want to be for my kid. And I want them to go out and learn things on their own to the point where like I don't need to protect them from the world, because the world is harsh. And if we overprotect our kids, I think that's where a lot of entitlement comes from. But, I don't want to shelter them from everything, but I want to be like close by when things happen, to give them that support and that love, and work on loving my children and listening to them based on what they need rather than what I think is best for them. Because I think that's where a lot of the upset happens as we grow up, is our parents love us and they did the best that they could from how they saw it, but not necessarily what we needed.
Agreed. And that's, I think, unless you're trained not to think along those lines, then that's just what everybody's going to do, right? Because that's probably how they were raised. That's just, again, how the world is in general. We're all very, very selfish. I feel the and again, I don't think we can go a whole podcast without getting political either. I actually think the more liberal extreme left are the most selfish. Not they have a mask of that they're the ones that care about the world the most, but I actually believe they're above and beyond the most selfish in regards to their feelings, because all they care about is their feelings, and they'll put that above everybody else. We're just selfish humans, and I think admitting that's the first step. I'm fucking selfish.
Yeah.
I care about people.
I mean, we all are. We all are selfish. Absolutely.
I care about. I asked Vinny on the podcast. I was like, the mask is just, again, the science supports that mask can help spread. So if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But it's just the modern version of just whatever society tells people is the best way to just be a good fucking person. It's just like, I don't know if you remember, but I was asked Vinny, like, why don't you donate all your free cash to help hunger? I'm like, you would save hundreds or thousands, I don't know how much free cash he has in his bank, hundreds or thousands or 10,000s of kids right now, Vinny, if you donated your free cash to solving hunger in Africa. Like, why don't you do that? Do you not care about these lives? Like, we all are fucking selfish people. Like, and we just put these, I actually said, I didn't realize when I was talking about the extreme left, I meant like metaphorical mask. And then I talked about COVID mask, which is that's the third type of mask I've referenced in this episode. We have the Halloween mask, a COVID
Yeah, I
mask,
mean,
and a metaphorical like disguise for
it
your
is a
personality.
bit ironic that, you know, we're being asked to wear masks, and it's like I feel like that's very much what everybody's kind of been doing throughout this whole thing anyway. It's made us so much more hyper vigilant, and of course that's what's going to happen when you remove connection. You can be a lot more edgy and blunt with people if you're not actually interfacing with them. You kind of forget the humanness. So yeah, we've all kind of been living with masks on, whether we've been wearing one literally on our face or not.
They're wearing people are wearing COVID masks on their metaphorical masks. So they're wearing two masks. Uh,
Basically.
so
Basically.
back to the mom thing real quick. I wanted to ask. Yeah, I wanted to ask what's an example of something that came up in your childhood that you've talked to your mother about that was a successful conversation. Like how did that go? Like something that came up with you and you brought it up with your mom and it ended up being really successful and you're really glad you brought it up.
Okay, so I mean, okay, so I didn't go to college. My dad, so maybe this is like my story around it. Maybe I'll learn something about myself when I share this right now. I don't know. So my dad passed away when I was 14. He was an alcoholic, and when I was 14, I was a freshman in high school when it happened. Like, that's an incredibly important time in a young girl's life or a young boy's life, but I'm speaking about myself. So anyway, yeah, like I just kind of stopped caring as much about school, and like I was really smart and I could have applied myself and gone into a 4-year school right after high school. That was kind of my plan when I was younger. That's what I wanted to do. And then I kind of just, I don't really fully remember what happened, but I kind of just stopped caring and things just didn't really seem like they mattered. My mom told me that I kind of just became more withdrawn from the world. I kind of shut people out. I know that I didn't talk about, my dad was like off limits. I wouldn't talk about that at all for years. Like I would just be like, don't bring him up. I blocked out all of that. I think I just kind of tried to pretend that if I didn't talk about it, maybe like it didn't happen or I could be okay. And I don't know. I'm way more comfortable with talking about it now, but it's just interesting to look at just the survival mechanisms that we take on to make life bearable at that like delicate age when all of that's happening. That was the way that I, made it. I survived that way just by kind of blocking it out and like toughing it. And maybe that wasn't the best way. Like I'm certain that wasn't the best way, but that was what I had at that, point in life experience. Of course, like I would go back and do it differently now, but here we are. So I didn't go to college and I kind of blamed my mom for that. I kind of blamed her, like, why didn't you push me? Like, you just kind of let me like cruise, and like I could have gone to college and, had gotten a better job when I was younger and whatever it was. I don't know. I used to have a big button about college being in some way like a status symbol, or like I have this expensive piece of paper that means I'm worthy. Like I have an education, so I'm somebody. I don't have that anymore. And like now I kind of look at it as like, maybe I missed out on an experience, but then I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. And I'm grateful for where I'm at right now. And, I think that instead of looking at it like, oh, my mom didn't push me, it was like my mom was doing the best that she could to navigate consoling her 14-year-old daughter who had just lost a father and wouldn't talk to her about it. I'm sure that was incredibly hard for her too. But I never looked at it like that. It was always like, why didn't you do this for me? Why didn't you, push me harder and make me go to school? And now I'm grateful that she let me decide. And I think maybe 14's a little bit young to be making those kind of decisions. But I think she trusted me a lot, that I would figure it out and I would land on my feet. And I think that I've definitely done that. I mean, I moved out to San Diego. Like, I made friends, I made connections, I got myself into an amazing business opportunity that's where I'm at now. It's continued to unfold and evolve. And it's like, all of those things wouldn't have happened if I would have got what I wanted at the time, which was to be pushed into college. So yeah, like, I think that I mean, I acknowledged her after I'd kind of made that realization, and talked to her about that. And that was something that ended up being more of a positive in our relationship.
That's awesome. What if you could go back right now, as where your age is now, which you're 27, right? About to be 28.
Yes.
So about almost 13, 14 years ago, what would you go back and tell your 14-year-old self? And just like
That I didn't have to be so that I didn't have to be so tough. Like, I didn't have to have it all together. I kind of felt like I had to have it all together. Like, I felt like I wasn't allowed to be sad about it. I don't know where that came from. Like, I haven't figured that part out. That's still something that I'm wondering. I mean, in doing more like inner child work, like you and I've talked about this, I haven't done too much. I've just done a little bit of meditation, but I mean, I'd like to get to the root to figure out like why I didn't feel that it was okay to be sad about my dad dying. Like, that's crazy to me. I don't know. Somewhere along the line, I didn't feel like my emotions were valid. And I almost kind of felt like it was like a competition with my mom. Like they were not married at the time. They'd been divorced for a long time, actually. When he passed away, they got divorced when I was a baby. So it's not as if it's the same thing as like, I just lost my husband. Like, I get what you're going through, but like, it is still a loss for her. Like, it always kind of felt competitive to me though. That it was like, I lost my dad and she's like, well, you're not the only one who's sad, kind of a thing. I don't feel like I got, as much empathy as I would have liked in that time. My family on my dad's side definitely didn't empathize with me. My memory of my dad dying was my family in the hospital on my dad's side fighting over who gets his stuff. And I'm sitting there having to make the decision to take him off of life support. And I have my grandpa and my uncle fighting over his belongings. Like, that was my memory of that. That was incredibly hard. So yeah, I shelled up after that. And I think I'm still shelled up in a lot of ways towards people, as open as I would like to think that I am. But yeah, these things impact us like we wouldn't believe. So yeah, I mean, I'm still growing and learning through it, and it's all I can really do right now.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And I know both of us have gone through some experiences here, and from our conversations, neither of us are perfect, but which is basically, everything I talk about. I don't feel like I'm perfect at anything. What would you recommend for people that want to talk to their parents about stuff? Like, how would you recommend they approach that?
Well, okay. I mean, it depends. Like, what kind of things do you think?
Something crazy came up in their childhood, some experience that's been on their mind, or something they've always wanted to talk to their parents about, but they've always just not felt comfortable or had the courage or confidence to do it.
I mean, that's tough. It's so individual for everybody. I don't even think that it needs to necessarily be a conversation with our parents. We can do so much healing on our own before we even bring them into it. So I would recommend doing as much healing as you can on, events from when you're younger, or even events from when you're older that may stem back to things when you were younger that you don't know what they are yet. I think that it's getting as clear on it and healing as much as you can on your own side of the street before you go bring in your parents. Because I think that can lead to a lot of bringing up a lot of like blame and resentment maybe. And like for me, the more that I realized that I'm responsible for my life, and the things that happen. Like, I mean, obviously I wasn't responsible for my dad dying, but like I am responsible for how I feel about it and how I've healed from it. So yeah, I think that it's just a matter of doing your own work and getting clear on your feelings and having compassion for our parents, because there's no like, line that we get to where it's like, okay, you're a complete adult and now you have all the answers. It's like we're all growing, we're all learning. So yeah, just continue to grow and learn on your own. And also, big piece of advice is don't force that on your parents. I think I've been guilty of doing that. Is like, I'm doing all this personal development and healing and all of this, and I want to share it with my mom because it's been so transformative for me, and she is not interested at all. And that's created a lot of tension between us. And I don't, yeah, it's not even my intention to fix her or change her. It's just that I recognize the power in learning and growing personally, and I would want to share that with her. But I mean, yeah, just you gotta just be able to meet people where they're at and just have compassion through it all. If they want to be open to it, that's great. If not, doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything about me. It doesn't mean it.
Yeah, and probably not just your parents, but just about anybody in life. I've learned when you like, because I've been the last 4 or 5 years really down the personal development path, and now I'm finding a balance. I think I've taken a step back. Like, I'm always gonna grow in that area, but now I'm like more into like books and podcasts and not as much into that, but that's still a part of my life, because I think just creating that balance is what I've been looking for. But I've learned over the last 5 years is pretty much everybody in your life doesn't want to hear you forcing your beliefs on them regularly.
And that's personal development. It's politics. It's everything.
Yeah, like I've learned with my parents, with my siblings. I mean, fortunately, Christopher, my little brother, ate it all up. So there's the handful of percentage that will get a lot from it, because I think me and my little brother were really close, and he doesn't listen to this podcast, so it's okay. I can say whatever I want. But, he doesn't hang out with a lot of people, so I feel, and he's 25 now, so at the time he was 20. I think we were living together around that time. We lived together for a couple of years, so I feel I was one that he like really just listened to and took guidance from. But outside of him and maybe a few others, pretty much everybody just ruined our relationship or hurt our relationship with me trying to force my like way of thinking on them. So I'm still trying to find the balance of, hey, I like, it would be my honor to talk to this stuff about you, or talk about this stuff with you when
tongue twister.
Yeah, talk about this stuff with you when you're ready, and like keep dropping little nuggets here and there, but not as much as I used to, where I would just try to ram it down their throat, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, and something that I've learned too is that like it's been something big that I've been working on is like the wanting to like force it on people, or being like, it's kind of a form of righteousness, like like, I've discovered this is like the way, like you should do this too because it's great. And like, I think that also stems from a needing validation thing, because like you want your path to also be accepted by other people and taken on, because then you'll feel better about it being right for you because it's right for other people. But like, it's not, you don't know what's right for them. But like all I'm working on is like, if my path is good for me and it feels good, it won't matter to me if this person that I'm talking to doesn't want to read the last book that I read or do the last course that I did, or it doesn't mean anything about me or them at all. Like, as long as I'm getting value from it, like, I just need to just stay in my own lane and just be good with what feels good to me, and let other people be good with what feels good to them. And I think through time, there's more of an attraction that will come to me where people will gravitate towards the right people, will gravitate towards what I've been doing, and then maybe ask me and want to know. But like only then I think is my new focus for, sharing things with people or wanting them to take on or try or read or do new things. Like, because then there's an interest there. I have no interest anymore in trying to go and force it on other people. It's unnecessary, like, upset in my life and a waste of energy at the end of the day. So
Yeah, and unfortunately, we have to ruin or hurt a lot of relationships to learn that. But we all learn. Like that's another. The irony
yeah.
is we're
What
growing.
cost?
The irony is we're growing like crazy as we're trying to push personal development stuff on people. We're actually learning a lot in the process as they're like, "Fuck you! Stop trying to force this stuff on me. I have 50 years of
Right. Yeah.
patterns. I'm not gonna let you just change me." And with one on the book recommendation, does anybody ever read any books people recommend? I feel it's a very rare. Oh, you should read this book.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read it.
Yeah. I mean, I've read a lot of books that you've recommended to me, and I think vice versa.
That's
So
true. But you know what I mean? Just random general conversation. You should read this book. Oh, that sounds great. That that by the way. So, all right. This is a little bit down a rabbit hole. But why, as humans, do we feel the need to just? That's something I want to get better at, and my buddy Mike Ambrosino is the one he's challenging himself on, and I'm like, that's so great. Like we constantly, well, oh yeah, read that book. Yeah, I'll read it. Oh, that show, check it out. Yeah, I'll check it out. Uh, oh the like, hey, a friend you haven't seen in a couple years. Let's grab lunch sometime. Okay, great. You never fucking grab lunch. Like
liar.
we commit to so many things when we don't mean it. And just like over the weekend with Ben, which actually we're gonna get him a kosher chocolate box. I'm gonna send it to him.
Amazing.
It'll be from both of us. But
Amazing.
why
I
do
love
we
that.
even little commitments like books and shows and grabbing lunch sometime with a friend you haven't seen in 2 months or catching up sometime or whatever the fucking term is? Why do we do that as humans, right? Like couldn't we just say no? I don't want to read that book or get lunch.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, so because it's hard, it's fucking hard, and people take it the wrong way. So this happened to me the other day. I had a old friend of mine. She sent me a DM, and she was like, "Hey, come. You should come to this work, or like want to come to this workout downtown. It's like downtown San Diego. They do like a boot camp class, but it's like at the same venue that they have like the day club at. So it's like a big thing, and they have like two fit chicks leading this thing, and it's like a free class, whatever. And she's like, yeah, like we should go to this sometime. And instead of just being like, yeah, like maybe like yeah, I could be down, like let me know. I said, you know what, like thank you for thinking of me, but I actually have no interest in going to a boot camp class at a pool party.
That's awesome.
And it didn't go over well. She took it to mean something about her, and I think we try to protect the other people and ourselves from being in those kinds of situations. And I responded because she just responded back and was like, okay, and I'm like, hey, like no, doesn't mean anything about you. I'm just not interested in that. And I'm being honest with you, so I don't commit to something that I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
it's tough. It was hard though. It's hard. Why is this so hard?
I don't know, but that's just another example of opportunity for growth in humans in two ways. One, us being honest. If we want to get lunch with them, tell them we want to get lunch with them. If we say, hey, maybe you're not lunch worthy, maybe let's hop on a call, or not maybe say you're not lunch worthy, but let's schedule a call, or let's text. It's just something authentic, or just say no, which obviously would be hurtful. But why do we have to lie? Like lying is a sin, right? And we just constantly lie about these things so we're lying and we're just not doing that person a service. They should be able to release the energy of being, I don't fucking know, but just, I need to work on
Yeah,
not committing
I
in that
mean,
level too.
yeah, so do I. So do I. Like, I think everyone is guilty of these things, and we think that it doesn't really make a difference, to just like we should catch up until like one of us dies type of a thing. Like it's just an ongoing thing, and um, it's just fine. But it's like if you get clear on the values of your life, and like if one of them is honesty, then I think for a lot of people want honesty, but like we need to be able to give honesty in order to receive it. And if we can't give honesty to the people in our lives, then do we really expect to get it in return?
Well, the best way for you to show love to this person was to be honest, because now she's not gonna knows not to reach out to you in the future and waste her time and energy and thinks there's a possibility, right?
Yeah.
If you would have just done
Yeah.
the typical response, I can't make it this time, but maybe next time, which is I feel what a
Right.
lot of people would say, she would be wasting more energy and she'd be like, oh, she's interested. And deep down, you're not interested. So you're wasting more time and she's wasting more time. And you're kind of leading her on when deep down you have zero interest. So it's the honesty you could look is actually like more kind, loving thing to do if we would just not take things so personally, which I do all the time, which is one of the four agreements is don't take things personally. But yeah,
Really worked on that one. Still working on it.
I
Daily
take shit
practice,
personal
really.
all the time. Before my little kid self on my phone, which is what I have now, as you know, for my child talk.
I
Before
do.
that was don't take things personally. So that's been my last two phone backgrounds. Don't take things personally, and my 6-year-old self or so. Uh,
Yeah. I
la-
love that.
Last question for you, and this is a really hard one. Uh,
Ooh, okay.
what drugs are you gonna take in 2021?
What drugs am I going to take?
Or ceremonies or whatever, plant herbal medicine. What kind of stuff are you gonna try in the next year?
Oh, I don't think this is a hard one at all.
I know I was being kind of
I
sarcastic.
mean, yeah, I mean, we've talked about this, so but for everyone listening, like I definitely have felt called to try ayahuasca. I think that um, from everything that I've heard about it, I probably heard about ayahuasca for the first time like a little over a year ago through another podcaster, Aubrey Marcus, who owns On It, who you guys have done business together actually. So yeah, I heard about it through him, and then kind of started hearing more about it in podcasts, and everybody says that ayahuasca is something that um, you'll feel called to do it because it is such a extreme experience. It can make you purge and throw up and shit yourself, and you have crazy visions of, it's not all like sunshine and rainbows of like this like healing journey. So a lot of people are like, well, why would somebody willingly sign up for that? And it's like, I think it's hard to explain, but I do feel that it is a calling. I feel like there's things in my life that, I could probably figure out maybe with therapy for the next however long, however many years. But I think that this is kind of a different modality to experience healing, and I'm all for it. And I want to dive into that, and I want to, free myself of some of these things that I feel like that I know on like a very surface level are limiting me from doing what I want in life or figuring out what I even want in life. And then there's for sure some things that I'm completely blinded to that are preventing me from growing. And I don't think that maybe I would get the same experience from continuing to do courses and reading and therapy and all of those things. Like I'm still going to do all those things, of course, but I think that this is like a deeper level of healing, and it's something that I'm very, very curious about. So that is definitely in the cards for my future. Other than that, I mean, I don't really have don't really have any other drugs on my list.
Okay.
Maybe some psilocybin. I do like mushroom chocolates. I think that those can be a great way to manage anxiety and things like that if they're microdosed properly. I mean, I also am a proponent of CBD and cannabis. So
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing.
I'm like, no other drugs minus these three.
Yeah,
I
no
do
drugs. Well,
actually more.
actually, these drugs, which, by the way, my libertarian viewpoint, and this is why, like, I lean conservative on things like the economy and the Second Amendment. I'm very progressive. I believe so many drugs, especially plant medicine, should be 100% legal because it does good work, and we're putting way worse shit into our bodies than plants. So anything from the ground, I feel like I'm more of an agnostic, but I feel like even super religious people, it's like if God put it here, I feel like it's meant to serve some purpose. It's growing from the ground. Yeah. It's meant to serve some purpose. Like what if God or whatever made marijuana, like it has to have, like, it's not just a plant to just sit there and do nothing. Like, there has to be a reason, right? We should just let people smoke it or eat it or whatever they want to do. But
I mean, I think it's more so just letting people do what they feel is best for them. And I think that that's kind of just like, honestly, just like what this all comes down to, like everything that we've talked about, that's just like the common theme is like, let people do what they feel is best for them. You figure out what feels best for you. Those things aren't going to be the same, and that should be celebrated. And the more we can respect other people's journeys while honoring our own is the recipe, I think, for us to have a better life.
Yeah, so you just made a really good point, and we can actually kind of close out on that right there. Is so we started the conversation about feelings and just being more respectful of people's feelings, just their feelings, their life choices, their preferences, and how they like to do things. Just let people do whatever the fuck they want. Like, ultimately, like, who cares what other people are doing? As long as if it's harming you, that's one thing. But if it's not, which most of the things we get worked up about are not harming you, let them care about haircuts or smoke weed or do mushrooms or whatever they want to do. Just let them do it.
I think it just, it goes back to just start noticing those things. Like when you start having an issue with something that somebody else is doing, just start noticing and being like, that's interesting. Like, why would I care?
Yeah. Why?
And like actually ask yourself and kind of see what comes up.
Does
it mean something about you?
Yeah, I still can't, like, who cares? Like, with some, like, we can probably almost agree that, okay, you probably shouldn't do ayahuasca and drive. You know, I think we're anti-driving under the influence of ayahuasca. Okay, but who cares what people are doing, like, in their own house on a Friday night with their friends? Like, why do we care if someone's selling their body for sex on Friday night to earn money to put food on the table for their kids, or because they just love it, or they just feel like, who cares? Like, why do we care about that? It makes no sense. But enjoyed having you on today. Thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Thank you for listening to Openly Outspoken with Jeremy Adams. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you get updated when new episodes are live. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to support is to leave a 5-star review and share the podcast with people in your life that you feel would benefit from these types of discussions. Visit openlyoutspoken.com for additional details on the show. Find out how to connect with Jeremy on social media and learn more information about Jeremy's personal and business life. We'll see you next time.